first thing Ethan noticed was how the lights didn't feel like light at all. It felt like weight, hot and heavy on his shoulders, pinning him in place as if the stage itself meant to keep him from turning back. Behind the footlights, the auditorium dissolved into a soft darkness, pierced by hundreds of faces that seemed to float in midair, mouths and eyes, and the gleam of braces catching the glow. "Who's the clown?" someone hissed from the third row. There was laughter. Sharp, skinny laughter that didn't fill the room so much as scratch at its edges. Ethan kept walking. His sneakers slipped a little on the polished wood. He reached the taped X in the center and stopped. The microphone waited for him like a dare. He could smell distilled curtains, old wood, the burnt metal smell of warm equipment. He could taste. Nerves on his tongue, metallic as a battery. His guitar hung from his shoulder, a thrift store rescue with worn frets and a scar down the lower bout like a healed wound. The strap was hand-stitched with the only thread he could find in the trailer, a pale blue that didn't match anything. He set his right hand against the strings, feeling the familiar buzz like a caged insect. On the floor in front of the stage, 3 judges sat behind a table draped with school blue cloth. The woman on the left had a pen poised above her score. Sheet, expression as neat and ironed as her blazer. The man in the middle lounged back with crossed arms and the comfortable skepticism of somebody who had seen this all before. The older man on the right tilted his head, glasses low on his nose. The faintest crease of a smile, proof that he still believed in being surprised. Next contestant, Ethan Cole, the MC said too brightly. Performing an original composition? Original? Someone snorted. "Right, you've got this," Ethan heard a voice whisper. It wasn't in the room. It wasn't a person. It was a memory, a kitchen light, a chipped mug, the low hum of the trailer's ancient fridge. His mother's voice, at 2 a.m, soft and hoarse from the late shift. "Ignore them, baby, you got music in you. Let it speak." He swallowed. His mouth was desert dry. He reached to adjust the mic, and his knuckles knocked it with a small, embarrassing thud that echoed through the sound system. Laughter again, louder. This time, someone imitated circus music, twad da 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 da, and the laughter broke into pockets. "Hey, Joker, play us a trick," a boy's voice called. Laughter, whistles. A teacher shushed them, but half-heartedly. This was the statewide talent showcase. Sure, it was also Friday night at Lincoln High. And a little cruelty traveled fast. Ethan stared at the audience and saw only shapes. He tried to locate his mother and failed. He told himself she was there, even if he couldn't find her. He told himself that if he failed, if he dropped a pick or forgot a chord or his hands, simply refused to obey, he could still walk home with her in the dark, and she would wrap him in that little half-hug. She did to hide how small she was, and tell him that sometimes a heart has to break to let the music in. He set his thumb on the 6th string and drew a breath. His chest lifted. His ribs were a cage that opened. He let the breath out, and with it the first note. It wasn't clean. It was a little wavered, a child stepping onto thin ice. But the note stretched, held, and found its footing. It vibrated in the wood and climbed up his arm like a warm animal. He let the next one fall in behind it, and the next, and the next. The pattern he had written in the blue hour between sleep and dawn began to knit itself together in the air. The auditorium didn't go quiet all at once. It plushened, like a room where a storm has moved through and the rain has softened. The laughter hiccuped and died. The room leaned in. The HVAC clicked once, and then the sound of it disappeared into the lattice of Ethan's melody. He was playing. Low at first, spare as a confession. His fingers found the run he had practiced 1,000 times at a desk made of a door balanced on milk crates. It unfurled like a ribbon. He didn't look at the judges. He didn't look at anyone. He looked at the space, just above the front row, where light met dark, and let his eyes blur until the world smeared into a single tender shape. In that blur, he could superimpose any room he needed. Tonight, he chose the trailer thin walls. The smell of detergent and onions, his mother asleep on the couch with the TV whispering a late-night sitcom. He felt the warm plastic of the old laptop beneath his wrist, the way the fan would whine when he pulled up a video, and the little buffering wheel would spin, 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 and he'd whisper please like prayer, because sometimes you had to wait. A long time for a free lesson, a run of 16th notes like raindrops, a pause wide enough to hold a breath. The melody rose a step, then another, a staircase invented as you climbed it. The chord he slipped to was one he'd found by accident. 3 months ago, pausing a tutorial to chase the sound he heard inside the sound, it tilted the piece like a camera shifting focus. He let it hang, then answered it with a resolve that felt older than he was. Out there in the dark. A girl with glitter on her eyelids lowered her phone without realizing it. The woman judges. Pen came down to touch her paper, not to write yet, but to anchor her hand, to steady herself as if the notes might pull her backward. The middle judge's arms uncrossed. His fingers drummed once on the table, then stopped as if surprised at themselves. The older judge sat perfectly still, his eyes bright behind his lenses, mouth soft. The way a person looks when they recognize a road they have not traveled in years. Ethan's left hand began to ache. That sweet ache that meant he was in the pocket, his knuckles angled just right over the fretboard. He thought of the neighbor who'd laughed last summer when she'd heard him through the open window. Said it sounded like a cat stuck in a drain. He thought of how he'd smiled and said nothing, because if you told people what you were building, they'd try to tell you how to build it. And some things had to be grown in the dark. He let his thumb brush the bass string harder, brought the pulse up out of the body of the song. The room found that pulse. Heads nodded the tiniest concession to a private rhythm. A teacher in the back row swallowed a tear and looked around. Embarrassed for no reason at all, his right hand picked a syncopation. He'd stolen from a blues video at 2 a.m, stolen. And made gentler, tilted toward the folk songs his mother had hummed washing dishes. He let his strum circle the melody like a hand cupping a flame. He dipped into the bridge heart of the piece, open and unguarded end. He played it more softly than he had ever dared. He had always thought the bridge needed to be braver than the rest, bolder, louder. But tonight he realized bravery could be delicate, courage could be quiet. A person standing still while everyone else stamped and jeered. His fingers brushed the strings as if the sound might shatter if he pushed too hard. The bridge broke him a little. He let it. He saw his mother at the kitchen table with the locket from his father in her palm, the chain slick with the oil from her skin, saying nothing for a long time. He saw the bank envelopes with windows that showed only bad news. He saw the YouTube comments under a video where some boy not older than him played an arrangement so clean it shone. He saw the comment where someone said anyone can learn this if they have lessons, and he had felt the sad hilarity of it like a joke, told 6 seconds too late. He saw the night he had busked on 9th Street as cars crawled past, the way a little girl had tugged her mother's hand and made her stop, the way the mother had smiled and dropped 2 crumpled singles into his case like a benediction. The music knew it all. It told it back to him and made it make sense. He opened his eyes because he had to check, had to make sure the room was still there and not some miracle he'd invented out of hunger. The room was there. More than there. It was with him. The faces he could make out were softened by something like kindness, or attention, or whatever it is that happens when a crowd becomes a single listening creature. He moved toward the climax. Without hurrying it, like a person leading a friend to a view they love, he layered a harmony on top of the melodious simple third, and a fourth just for a measure, wrong on paper but right in the chest. He let the rhythm tighten under it like a tide pulling. The bass thumped a little more squarely. He let his right hand bloom into a full strum for the first time all night, and the auditorium seemed to open at the seams. The sound pouring outward. From somewhere near the front, the boy who had shouted "Joker" sat very still. His jaw clenched, his eyes glossy with something he would later call dust. The older judge's smile deepened by a fraction. The woman judge's pen scratched once. A quick breath of ink. The middle judge leaned forward, elbows on the table now, chin on knuckles, the posture of a skeptic learning. He'd been rooting for the miracle all along. Ethan let the harmony fall away, and brought the melody back small and alone for the final movement, like a person stepping off a train in the town where they started. He peeled the last theme down to 3-note stocking. Really, like a question asked and answered. Are you here? I am. Are you sure? I am. He remembered the trailer door that stuck in the summer, the trick of lifting it just so to get it to latch. He remembered the bite of his first metal strings, the way they cut him until the skin toughened into small shields. He remembered the way the internet made the world huge and near at once, how a boy in India had taught him a flamenco flourish in 10 minutes. How an old man in Mississippi had shown him, through a grainy camera, how to make a G-chord ring like a church bell. How a woman in Snow Polo had said in the comments, "Your hands will stop hurting, keep going, keep going." Yet he landed the penultimate chord with a small splay of his fingers, a tiny flourish he had never risked in practice. It worked. The sound broke like light on broken water. He felt a grin threaten his mouth and held it back, not because it would have been wrong to smile, but because he didn't want to step out of the song too early, wanted to finish inside it. The last measures came like twilight, closing with the unhurried certainty of something that knows where it belongs. He plucked the final note with the pad of his ring finger, so it would bloom instead of bite. It rose, hovered, and began to fade, its echo finding the corners of the ceiling. Silence. It wasn't the silence of shock. It was the silence of prayer, the kind that feels full. Even the lights seemed to dim their heat. Ethan stood with his head slightly bowed, his fingers still poised, as if any movement might jar the air and make the moment spill. In the back row, a woman with work-rough hands brought both palms to her mouth. For a suspended second, nothing and everything happened. One heartbeat, two. The auditorium breathed together. Someone sighed. Someone else laughed once, not because anything was funny, but because joy can trick the body into using any exit. Ethan lifted his head and let his eyes find the light dark border again, grateful for its blur. He was not shaking. Now, his hands had stopped being two separate animals and were his again. He let the guitar's neck slide into the curve of his palm like a handshake, like thanks. He had the strange, lucid feeling you get after swimming underwater longer than you meant to, and breaking the surface into air, at last lightheaded and sharp at the same time. In the judges' row, pens were moving. In the third row, a boy who had planned to record and mock decided to keep the video for himself. On the aisle, a girl who planned to go to Berkeley next fall watched his hands and thought, I remember when it felt like that. A cough. A whisper. Then something like the sun came back into the room as hands drew together, first a scattering of claps, then the ripple of others joining, then a wave. The applause didn't crash, climbed, the way his melody had, gathering height, as if it had a destination in mind. Ethan let out the breath he hadn't meant to hold. He didn't bow, just stood there a little stunned, his face open and young and a tiny bit disbelieving. He could feel the burn at the hinge of his jaw, the sweet ache where grief and relief sit side by side. He glanced at the judges. Woman gave him the briefest nod, professional and strange, yet warmer than the stage lights. The middle judge clapped once, a sharp crack, as if he were clapping for himself for having been wrong. The older judge's hands were already together, slow and delighted. Like a grandfather clapping for a child's first steps, he scanned the crowd, not because he needed their faces, but because he needed one face, found her at last, far back. Off to the side, his mother, her hair pulled back, the cheap silver locket catching enough light to wink. Her cheeks were wet. She was smiling the way people smile at the ocean, undone and proud all at once. He lifted the guitar slightly, the way you lift a glass to someone across a room. This is yours too, he thought, and he could swear she nodded as if she'd heard. The MC's voice floated in from the wings, hushed. Thank you, Ethan Cole. The applause flowed around the words unbothered. Ethan stepped back from the mic, the tape X under his shoe peeling up a little as it let him go. He didn't think of the cheap fabric of his shirt or the scuffs on his sneakers or the whispers that had greeted him. He thought of the second verse he didn't play tonight, the one he would carry home and lay on the table like a new piece of bread. He thought of the door as it would sound when they opened it together, he and his mother walking into the small square of kitchen light. Like it was a stage big enough for two. As the applause settled, something new moved through the room. Not noise, not laughter, but attention. softened and sharpened all at once. The kind that follows you off stage. It's the kind that makes people remember. The kind that later, when the night is over and the chairs are stacked and someone asks, "Did you see the kid with the old guitar?" will make their voices change when they say, "Yeah." Ethan gave the room one last look. Disbelief and gratitude braided so tightly he couldn't separate them. He turned to leave slowly, careful with his steps, and with the instrument in his arms. Behind him, the mic stood empty, humming the ghost of a note. Ahead of him, the wings were only shadow and a soft murmur of stagehands. But beyond that shadow was everything else. Hallways, doors, the rest of the night, the rest of his life. He didn't know yet what would happen next. He only knew this. When he had been mocked, he had not run. When he had been afraid, he had played anyway. And for a few minutes in a Friday night auditorium at Lincoln High, the sound he had learned alone in a small room had belonged to everybody. The last of the clapping faded. He stepped into the wings, and in the brief quiet that followed, before the next act's drum kit rattled onto the stage and the MC found his cheerful voice again, Ethan pressed his lips to the scar on the guitar for luck, for thanks, for everything. And somewhere inside him, the song kept going. The applause was still echoing in Ethan's ears when he slipped into the wings of the auditorium. But in his mind, he was already somewhere else, back to the nights that had brought him here. The sound of his guitar, still vibrating in his chest, unlocked the door of memory. It always began with silence, not the clean silence of a library or the gentle hush of a snowfall. No, the silence of the trailer park was alive, heavy, restless. It hummed with the clatter of distant trains, with the occasional bark of a chained dog, with the muffled arguments of neighbors carried through thin aluminum walls. It was the kind of silence that made you want to fill it with anything that belonged to you. For Ethan, something was music. The trailer he shared with his mother sat at the far end of Lincoln Park Estates, a stretch of aging. Mobile homes huddled under tired oak trees. The trailer leaned slightly to the left. A front step squeaked under even the lightest weight. Inside, it smelled faintly of detergent and frying oil from the diner where his mother worked double shifts. He had carved out his little sanctuary. In the corner of their shared bedroom, a folding chair, a wobbly desk made of a salvage door laid across two crates, and the second-hand guitar he had rescued from the thrift store. The first night he brought it home, his mother had raised an eyebrow. "You sure it even works?" she asked, gently testing the jagged scar on its wooden body. "It works," Ethan said quickly, though he wasn't sure. She sighed, then smiled. "If anyone can make it sing, it's you." That was all he needed. Most nights began the same way. His mother would stumble in from her shift at Rosie's diner, her uniform smelling of grease and coffee. She'd drop her tips into an old cookie tin they used as a savings jar, kick off her shoes, and collapse onto the couch. Sometimes she would talk to him in soft murmurs until her eyelids grew heavy. Sometimes she would simply smile at him with that exhausted kind of love that spoke louder than words. Then the house would go quiet, except for the soft hum of the fridge, and Ethan would begin. He balanced his mother's old laptop on the crate, its screen cracked but still glowing. The Wi-Fi in the trailer park was unreliable, but he had learned to wait for the buffering wheel with the patience of a monk. When the video finally played, the pixelated face of a guitar teacher halfway across the world would appear, explaining chords and finger placements. Ethan would pause, rewind, mimic the hand shapes, and then try them on his own guitar. At first, the sound was unbearable squeaks, buzzing, wrong notes that made the neighbors laugh through the walls. "Somebody strangled that cat already," he once shouted, and he winced, but kept going. Every mistake became a lesson. Sore fingertip became a badge of progress. He taped his fingers to keep playing through the pain, whispered chord names under his breath until they became second nature, and filled notebooks with diagrams and half-written songs. Some nights his eyes burned from exhaustion, but the moment he touched the strings, the fatigue faded. Music became not just practice, it became escape, prayer, confession, promise. There was one night he would never forget. The Wi-Fi had cut out just as a tutorial was loading, leaving him staring at a frozen thumbnail. Frustrated, He strummed aimlessly, repeating the same 3 chords he had managed to memorize. Chords looped into each other, forming something raw and unpolished. But it carried emotion. He stopped, played it again. And again, by dawn, he had created his first melody. His fingers throbbed, but when his mother woke, sat on the edge of the couch and played it for her. She listened, eyes half closed, her tired body sinking into the cushions. When the last note faded, she whispered, "That's beautiful, Ethan." Voice cracked with pride. That single sentence meant more than 1,000 cheers could. The days at school were harder. Ethan was the boy from the trailer park. It's the one who never had new shoes, the one whose mother worked too much and whose father was a ghost. He kept his head down, but word spread that he was trying to be a musician. They laughed. They mimicked his clumsy strumming. Some called him the Joker, others the wannabe rock star. A few cruel ones asked if he planned to play outside Walmart for spare change. It hurt, but he never let them see. Instead, he carried their laughter home and poured it into practice. On weekends, when his mother's pay barely stretched to cover bills, Ethan carried his guitar downtown. He stood on a corner near the coffee shop, opened his case, and played. Most people ignored him. Some smirked. Few threw in coins, sometimes even a dollar bill. Every cent went into the cookie tin. Every time someone stopped to listen, even for just a few seconds, it lit a fire inside him. Then came the poster. He saw it taped to the school's bulletin board. State high school talent competition. Open to all. The bold letters seemed to jump off the page. At first, he laughed to himself. A kid like him didn't belong there, not with polished pianists and kids who had been taking lessons since they were 5. But as he walked away, he felt something tug inside him. What if? That night, he brought it up to his mother. "They'll laugh at you," she said softly, not unkindly, but with fear in her eyes. "They already laugh," he replied. She looked at him for a long moment, then reached for the locket around her neck, the only thing she had left from his father. She placed it in his palm. "Then promise me this," she whispered. "Whatever happens, you'll play with your whole heart." From that moment, every note Ethan played was for the competition. Every practice session was longer, harder, more intense. His fingers bled, but he wrapped them and kept going. His eyes stung with fatigue, but he refused to stop. He had no lessons, no sheet music, no mentor, only the internet, his determination, and the memory of his mother's tired smile. And deep inside, he carried a single dream that one day he would play a song so true, so raw, that no one could call him a joker again. That was the silent struggle that carried him onto the stage, the struggle hidden behind every trembling note, every callous, every sleepless night. And now, as the applause of Chapter 1 still lingered in his ears, Ethan remembered all of it: the silence of the trailer, the glow of the laptop, the neighbor's laughter. His mother's faith, he remembered, and he smiled. Because everything, every hardship, every humiliation had brought him here, and this was only the beginning. Saturday afternoons on 9th and Willow smelled like sugar and gasoline. The donut shop vented warm glaze into the street. The stoplight exhaled cars and red-green breaths. On the corner, where the shade from a sycamore pooled like cool water, Ethan flipped open his case and set the guitar on his thigh. He always paused before the first note. Not to tune, he had tuned twice already, but to listen. To traffic, footsteps, the rustle of a paper bag, a bell on a shop door. He tried to hear the tempo the street kept for itself, the invisible metronome of ordinary life. If he could find it, he could lay his melody on top, like a hand placed gently on a shoulder. He began soft. A simple figure, 2 notes, leaning on a third. An old man with a grocery cart slowed, then didn't. A woman pushing a stroller glanced over and smiled the way you smile at a child who is playing earnestly. A barista on a smoke break tilted her head, then turned away when her manager shouted for her. Coins made their particular sound when they landed on velvet light. Ping, little clatter. It was a sound with its own shape. Sometimes he could tell what had been thrown just by the note. Quarters were heavier, resilient. Pennies landed like small apologies. He wasn't there to get rich. He was there to practice being seen. The first group of kids announced themselves by volume alon, sneakers slapping, laughter with elbows in it. He knew 2 of them from school, boys who wore varsity letters like armor. Ah! One lifted his phone and started recording before he had even reached Ethan's corner. "Yo, Joker," the boy said, long voice amused. "Do, Freebird." Laughter. They meant nothing by it, and they meant everything. Ethan felt the heat rise in his cheeks and forced his hands to keep moving. He slid to the chorus run he had written last week and played it cleaner than he had in the trailer. He let the sound speak between them like a witness. The boy's laughter thinned, kept recording. "Put the hat out, my guy," he said. "That bread." He flicked a coin in without looking. A nickel. The camera stayed on Ethan's hands like a dare, and then drifted away. As the boys got bored and bled into the street, Ethan held his breath through the tail of the measure and let it go with the bass string, a low, steadying thrum. The sycamore's leaves made a sound like whispering rain. Traffic surged. A siren threaded itself through the tempo and was gone. He closed his eyes and played the melody he had written for mornings, a piece that tasted like toast and dust motes. It was the one his mother said made the trailer feel bigger. "Hey," a small voice said. A girl stood 2 feet from his case, wearing a backpack too large and scuffed pink shoes with galaxies of glitter where the toes had cracked. "My mom says I can put this in." She held a folded dollar. The mother lingered behind, shy, the kind of shy that comes from long weeks. Ethan nodded to the girl, not stopping the song. "Thank you," he said. And the words floated in the measure's open space like a bird in an updraft. The girl placed the dollar as if it were delicate. "How do you make your fingers do that?" she asked, whispering, as if she might wake the music. Ethan smiled. "Very slowly," he said. And then one day, not so slowly. The mother laughed softly and tugged the girl away, murmuring thanks into the afternoon. Ethan finished the piece and let the last note breathe. A breeze lifted the edge of a flyer taped to a lamppost and revealed the bold letters beneath: State High School Talent Competition, open to all, April 23rd. The date lanced through him like the first cold step into a river. He had seen the poster at school and pretended not to. Here it was again, impossible to ignore, brazen in daylight. He stared at it while he played, the way a driver might stare past a cliff by focusing on the horizon. There was always a reason to say no. Shoes with holes, strings that frayed. The way his stomach clenched when people laughed. There was always a reason to say yes. The ache in his hands. The melody that would not leave him alone. The way his mother's eyes changed when he played. As if she were seeing a place where the air was easy to breathe. He made $26 and some coins that day. Back at the trailer, he counted it onto the table 1 piece at a time and slid it into the cookie tin. His mother came in from her second shift with a tired flare of lipstick that made her look like she had gone somewhere nicer than Rosie's. "That many?" she said, eyebrows up, when he told her. He shrugged like it was nothing, because there is a dignity in shrugging. "People were kind today," said. "People are sometimes," she answered, sinking into the chair. She unpinned her name tag and set it down as if it were heavy. He looked at the poster. He hesitated. "Which one?" She gave him a look. "The one that meant baby, I was born at night, but not last night." He took a breath he didn't mean to hold. "Yeah, and I'll go," he said, before he could stop himself. He set it to the table, to the tin, to the locket that glinted at her throat. Saying it out loud moved it from wish to plan. It felt like stepping onto a moving walkway's weight changed. The room shifted. She watched him for a long couple of seconds. Her face did that complicated thing it did when she wanted to tell him the truth, and the truth was a mess of yes and no. "I'm scared for you," she said at last, because she never lied to him. "People can be not kind." He nodded. "They already aren't," he said, and the smile he gave her had splinters in it. "But I think I want to find the kind ones and make them louder." She breathed out, something like a laugh in it. She reached for the locket, then stopped, and, instead, reached for his hand. "Then I'm scared," she said, "and I'm proud." They registered on the school's website using the Wi-Fi stolen from the laundromat next door, shifting the laptop around the living room to find the spot where the signal held. The form asked for a title of the piece. Ethan typed, "Tin Roof, Open Sky." He didn't know why until later, when he lay in bed listening to rain drum the trailer and felt the astonishing way the roof made the storm into music. From that night, practice changed character. It was no longer ours piled haphazardly like laundry. It was architecture. He made a plan and taped it to the wall. Warm-up, scales, finger independence, dynamics, endurance, performance. He wrote out a daily ladder with rungs he could reach and one he could not. He set a phone on the crate and recorded himself, then watched, wincing, and made notes. He learned the ugly truth. In the mirror, his best passages were the ones where his face went still, his shoulders fell, his breath found the song's breath. He learned to let silence take up more room, practice putting the guitar down and picking it up again. An entrance as deliberate as a first sentence, he also learned what broke him, mocking laughter outside the trailer, a neighbor pounding the wall and yelling about noise, a video freezing at the exact moment a teacher folded a meaning into a phrase. When those things happened, he did dishes. He scrubbed the counter, took the trash out, and stood under the cutout of stars at the trailer park, left the sky, and waited for the rush in his ears to die down. Then he went back in and began again, because he had decided, and the deciding had changed him. One afternoon at school, he was leaving math, when Ms. Ramirez from the music room leaned out her door. "Cole," she said. She had never had him as a student. Music class was an elective. And electives cost money one way or another, but she had seen him carrying the case. "You busk on 9th, right?" He paused. "Sometimes." "You've got hands," she said, simply nodding at his fingers. "You need strings?" He understood the question contained the answer. He nodded. She crossed the room, rummaged in a drawer, and came back with a packet of phosphor bronze like a blessing. "These are light gauge," she said. "They'll sing if you treat them like they matter." He could have said 100 things. He said, "Thank you," the way a thirsty person says water. "If you want the auditorium after school, it's empty Thursdays." She looked at his face like it might break under kindness. "Let's just lock up." He carried the strings home like contraband. He folded into the small of the couch with his mother and told her about the teacher with the drawer of miracles. "See?" his mother said, eyes wet in that quick way they got. Loud kindness. Thursday after school, he stood alone on the stage where he would later shake in the light. The room was a body without a heartbeat, rows of seats like ribs, the hush of dust in high places. He sat on the edge and tuned under the hush, the notes blooming differently here, longer. The way sound behaves when it finally has room to stretch. He practiced walking out, standing still, breathing. He practiced starting and stopping, as if humiliation might cut him off at the knees, and he would have to start again while the blood was still bright. He practiced looking into light and refusing to shrink. He practiced not needing permission. He also practiced failure. He would purposely miss a run, flinch at the ugliness, and then before his heart could do that rabbit thing, he would play the next measure, clean and sweet. As if the mistake had been a word in a sentence, and the sentence meant something anyway. On a cold Sunday morning, 2 weeks before the competition, he busked in front of the farmer's market. The air held that bright chill that makes you believe in beginnings. An older couple stopped, listened through a whole piece, and placed 2 5s in the case. "You wrote that?" the woman asked. Her scarf was the exact yellow of a school bus. He nodded. "It's honest," she said. "People try so hard to be impressive. That sounded like you let the music tell the truth first." On the way home, he repeated the sentence in his head until it wore smooth and became part of him. Truth first. Impress later. Maybe never. Afternoon, as he sorted the gate of a tricky bridge, 2 boys from school passed the trailer and knocked on the window with their knuckles, laughing. "Hey, Hendrix," one called, voice thick with sugar and cruelty. "Play us something to go with our pizza." They left a grease circle on the glass, where one of them had pressed a slice in a joke that wasn't. He stood very still until Silence returned. Then he cleaned the window. Then he sat down and finished the bridge. He told no one that the finished bridge made him cry. He didn't know how to explain that the notes had lined up like stars and suddenly made a picture he recognized, except the picture was of something that had not happened yet. A week before the competition, the school held an assembly. The MC, with his bright voice, ran through logistics. Auditions were closed to the general student body, just participants and judges. "We want your best," he said. "We want your brave." Kids murmured, snickered. Someone started a chant for a senior whose band had an amp big enough to shake the bleachers. Ethan sat on the far end, next to a girl with ink-stained hands who drew constellations on notebook paper when teachers talked. "You performing?" she asked without looking up. He hesitated. He had learned that the word yes could change. "The shape of a day, yeah," she nodded. "Henrietta," she said, "like an offering." "Ethan." "Break a string, Ethan," she said, and smiled at her own dark little joke. The night before the competition list was posted, his mother came home with a brown paper bag, and the look she wore when she had done something she couldn't afford, but would not take back. She pulled out a button-down shirt, second-hand dove gray. "It's a little big," she said, as if it were a flaw. "So you can grow into it like a promise." He held it up to his shoulders in the kitchen light. "It's perfect," he said, because it was, in the ways that mattered. Clean, sturdy, hopeful. She set the bag aside, and then, after a moment, unclasped the locket. She had never taken it off in front of him. It dangled from her fingers, a small, shining moon. She placed it in his palm. "For the stage," she said. "For your father, who would clap so loud they'd tell him to sit down." He shook his head. "I can't, you can," she said. "You will. You'll give it back after, and it will have heard your song." He threaded the chain under the shirt collar and felt its small, cool weight against his skin, right where. The music seemed to begin when he played. The day the order of performers went up, he read it 3 times to make sure his name was real. Ethan Cole. Original composition. He felt the words in his bones like a new key signature. "You belong here." That afternoon he went to the empty auditorium, unlocked it with the key Ms. Ramirez had pressed into his palm with a conspirator's wink, and stood in the lights. He played the whole piece top to bottom without stopping. Played it too fast. Played it again, slower, until the room breathed with him. In the second verse he changed a single note he had never loved, lowered it a half step. So it fell into the bass like a coin into a well. It landed and made a circle that kept widening until he realized he was smiling in an empty room. When he finished, he didn't bow. He set the guitar down and sat in the front row and listened to the room remember him. The locket lay warm against his chest, as if it had been taking notes. On the way out, he found himself in the dim hall outside the theater, where the trophy case held a history lesson in brass. Team photos, plaque for debate, champions with names engraved so tiny they looked like scripture, a sun-faded ribbon for a science fair. He pressed his fingers against the glass and left 5 half-moons of fog that faded slowly. He tried to picture a small card, special, pre-Ethan Cole original composition. He tried and failed and then tried again until the trying itself felt like a practice that mattered. That night he couldn't sleep. He lay in the narrow bed and watched the moving patterns the streetlight made on the wall like water. He pictured the stage, the laughter, the silence, the song. He pictured himself walking out and not shrinking. He pictured his mother in the back row, her hands clasped, the locket against his skin. The way the last note would find the ceiling like a home. At 4 a.m. he got up, made tea because he had read that singers did and felt like maybe guitarists should too, and sat at the table with the instrument across his knees like a sleeping child. He didn't play. He just rested his hand on the wood and felt the memory of sound wash back into his palm. He closed his eyes and heard Ninth and Willow, the donut sugar, the sirens, the girl with the galaxy shoes, the teacher with the drawer of strings, the old couple's honest, the neighbor's greasy joke at the glass, the coin note of a quarter, the lullaby of rain on tin. He understood suddenly that every laugh, every kindness, every coin, every door slam had been a metronome click bringing him to the downbeat he was about to play. When dawn came gray and shy through the blinds, he put on the dove-gray shirt, tucked the locket under the collar. He packed his thrift store guitar, with its scar and his hand-stitched strap. He looked at the cookie tin and considered taking $1 for a bus fare and decided to walk instead, because walking would feel like warming up. At the door, his mother stopped him with a hand on his chest. She didn't say good luck, because luck was something you bought in scratch-offs at the gas station. She said, play with your whole heart, and then softer, with a fierce light under the softness, and let them bring theirs if they have. One, he nodded. He wanted to say something luminous. He said, I will, because sometimes the truest words are only two on the walk to school. He counted the cracks in the sidewalk and matched them to measures. He didn't think about the boys with phones or the smirks in row 3. He thought about the note he had lowered a half step and how it felt like telling the truth in a smaller voice. He reached the auditorium doors and found them heavy. It's the kind of heavy that makes you set your shoulder and push. On the other side, the air smelled like fresh paint and dust and a little bit of fear. He stepped in. He could feel the day like a hand on his back, steady, not pushing, just there. He was late to nerves. He would catch up to them on stage. For now, he breathed and listened. Somewhere in the wings, a drumstick fell and skittered. Somewhere in the hall, a trumpet tried a bright, uncertain arpeggio. Somewhere in his chest, a bird beat its small wings. And lifted, he thought of the poster of the word open in big letters. He understood that open meant a door, but also a heart, and he decided to walk through with both. He set his case down, tuned. He touched the locket, then he waited for her. His name. The night before the competition, the trailer was too small for Ethan's thoughts. Every sound pressed in on him, the hum of the refrigerator, the drip of the leaky faucet, the groan of the wind against the aluminum siding. Normally those sounds blended into the familiar rhythm of his world. Tonight they were a chorus of nerves, reminding him how fragile everything was. He sat at the edge of his bed, the guitar across his lap, his fingers raw from hours of practice. His notebook lay open on the desk, its pages crowded with chord diagrams, scrawled lyrics he never sang, and doodles of stars and guitars that filled the margins when he couldn't find words. His reflection in the small, cracked mirror stared back at him, too-thin frame, hair falling into his eyes, the dove-gray shirt hanging loose around his shoulders. He tugged at the collar, revealing the silver locket that glimmered faintly in the lamplight. He touched it with his thumb. For the stage, his mother had said. For your father, who would clap so loud they'd tell him to sit down, but right now. Ethan didn't feel like anyone would clap at all. The voices of his classmates replayed in his head, cruel and clear. Joker, wannabe, you don't belong here. Could still see their sneers. Hear the sarcastic applause when he played outside the cafeteria once. He could still feel the sting of shame burning his cheeks when they shoved videos of him online, paired with mocking captions. What if the whole auditorium laughed like that tomorrow? What if he froze? What if the judges cut him off after the first note? Ethan closed his eyes. His chest tightened until it hurt. His fingers hovered over the strings but refused to move. The silence grew unbearable. Then the bedroom door creaked. His mother leaned against the frame, her diner uniform wrinkled, her hair tied back loosely. She carried a steaming mug of chamomile tea, her nightly ritual after double shifts. You're still at it? She asked softly. Ethan shrugged, not looking up. Can't stop. She walked in, set the mug down on his desk, and sat beside him on the bed. For a long time, she said nothing. She just looked at him, her tired eyes taking in the boy who was no longer so little, the guitar that had become almost a part of him, the locket shining faintly against his chest. Finally, she spoke. Ethan, I know you're scared. He laughed. Dryly. That obvious? She smiled faintly. You've been biting your lip all night. Used to do that when you were 5 and tried to build Lego towers taller than yourself. I always knocked them down, he muttered. And you always built them again, she countered. Her hand reached for his, steady and warm. Tomorrow isn't about them. The judges, the kids in the crowd, none of them matter. Tomorrow is about you telling the truth you've carried in here. She tapped his chest, just above the locket. If you tell it honestly, you've already won. Ethan swallowed hard. What if they don't hear it? Then that's their loss, she said firmly. But I'll hear it, I promise. Her words didn't erase his fear, but they shifted it, softened it into something he could carry. After she left the room, Ethan picked up his guitar again. He adjusted his grip, winced at the sting of his blistered fingers, and began to play. Slowly, at first hesitant, faltering, but then stronger. The melody filled the room, weaving through the shadows on the walls, his bloodied fingertips left. Faint red marks on the strings, but he kept going. Each note was a defiance against doubt, against mockery, against the world that told him he didn't belong. By midnight, his fingers were bandaged with strips of gauze. By 2, his eyes burned, but the music was still flowing. By 3, he was whispering to himself between measures, almost like prayer. You can do this. You can do this. The locket rested heavy against his skin, as if it held the weight of generations. As if his father's unseen hand steadied his trembling one. At 4 in the morning, exhaustion finally claimed him. He fell asleep sitting upright. In the chair, the guitar still across his knees, the lamplight glowing dim. His mother tiptoed in before dawn, draped a blanket over his shoulders, pressed a kiss to his hair. "You're ready?" she whispered. "Whether you believe it or not." That night, the night before, everything, Ethan's room was filled with silence again. But this time, it wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of waiting, of holding its breath for what was about to come. Backstage smelled like sawdust and Sharpie ink. Gaffer tape crossed the floor in faded scars. And someone had written set list in block letters on the wall, even though tonight wasn't a concert. It felt like one anyway, the jitter of bodies. The clipped whispers, the huddle of courage before a door. Contestant 12. "Ready?" Stagehand asked, not looking up from his clipboard. Ethan nodded. Well, though ready felt like a word meant for different weather. He rolled his shoulders the way Ms. Ramirez had shown him up. Back down, and felt the guitar settle against him as if it had taken a breath too. He touched the locket under his collar. Cool metal, steady heartbeat. Through the curtain, he could hear the tale of a tap routine, heels stuttering like rain on a porch roof in applause that came tidy and polite. The MC's voice rose, warm and bright with practiced cheer. And next up, an original composition from Lincoln High Zone. A tiny pause for effect. Ethan Cole. For half a step, he didn't move.
Yes.
Then the door in him opened and his body walked through. The lights did what lights do. They found him and made the rest of the world dim. He reached the taped X. He heard a low, ripple laugh there. A whisper heard the same current he'd felt when he first stood here at rehearsal. When he'd imagined the worst so the worst would have less room. He set his feet hip-width apart, tilted the mic away, not toward he wasn't singing, and let his left hand rest on the fretboard like a promise. The first note was a homecoming. It went out across the room, a thread that did not break. He placed the next beside it, and the next, and the next. Careful as bricks, honest as breath. The guitar cheap in price, rich in stubbornness, answered him with the voice he knew best. A little husky around the edges, patient at the core. Silence gathered itself around the sound. The boy who had called him Joker earlier in the season slouched lower in his seat, unable to make the joke fit the moment. The girl with glittered eyelids leaned forward until her chin balanced on her fist. 2 teachers in the back row went still with the particular stillness of people who have been waiting for a reason to be moved. Ethan did not look for faces. He looked for the place where the air felt thinnest and put the melody there like water. The opening figure lifted and fell, a tide with something urgent under it. He pressed the bass with his thumb just enough to lay down a heartbeat. Let the treble sing over it. The right-hand pattern he'd borrowed from a Mississippi tutorial found its pocket. The left-hand slide he'd invented in the trailer landed on the scarred wood with a whisper. He felt the audience's breath start to mirror his on-inhale on the rise. Exhale on the fall until the room was a lung and he was the weather moving through it. On the judge's table, pens hovered. The woman in the blazer, letter guarded, expression loosened. The middle judge, king of crossed arms, leaned forward until his chair spoke a small, embarrassed squeak. The older judge wore that sideways smile of someone recognizing an old road walked by new shoes. He reached the measure that had always frightened him, the one where his fingers had to leap instead of step, and leaped. The notes landed true, bright, a string of small bells across a river. A rustle moved through the crowd, the helpless rustle people make when they witness something delicate go right. He didn't hurry the bridge. He approached it the way you approach a sleeping child, with reverence, with the knowledge that volume is not the only way to be big. He let the rhythm loosen as if the piece had found a place to sit. He softened his picked two fingertips and plucked the chord he'd lowered a half step a week ago. It broke his own heart again, and he let it, because the breaking was the point. The locket warmed against his skin. In that warmth came a wash of pictures. His mother asleep with a fork still in her hand, the U2 buffering wheel turning like a moon, Ninth and Willow's sugar air, the old couple saying honest. The grease circle on the trailer window, Ms. Ramirez's drawer of strings, the sycamore leaves whispering in time. The pictures didn't distract him. They made the notes truer. The music was not about sadness. It was about the line that runs through sadness like a spine. Halfway through the bridge, he shaped silence like clay. He placed it between phrases, clean, empty spaces where the audience could set down what they carried and pick it up again changed. Those little voids taught the sound how to matter. From the balcony, someone sighed and then clapped a hand over. Their mouth embarrassed. He smiled with his fingertips and answered with a phrase so soft it felt like a secret. He tipped into the climb. The bass grew purposeful. The treble laced around it, climbing hand over hand. He didn't go for clever, he went for clear. He let the harmony ride a third. Then just for a fleeting measure, he bent toward a fourth again. The room opened like a book. He could feel, more than hear. A few soft gasps blend into the air. The music became bigger than the boy playing it. It poured off the stage and found the places it needed to go. The middle judge's fingertip tapped once, twice, then gave up pretending and kept time. Ethan brought the climb not to a shout, but to a wide, generous horizon. He arrived there and didn't plant a flag. He sat down. He let the melody look out over what it had built, and then gently turned it toward home, and home tonight was small again. 3 notes, question and answer. 3 notes, answer and grace. He rested the pad of his ring finger on the final harmonic, coaxed it to bloom until it shimmered like light on tin. The note rose into the rafters and seemed to hang there, disobeying time for one stubborn heartbeat. 2, 3. Then it faded. As all true things do, the silence that followed was whole. No one filled it with noise. Even the lights seemed to hold themselves a little quieter. Then stayed inside it, eyes down, shoulders easy, his hands suspended as if the song might want one more breath. He could feel the room's attention like a warm hand at his back, the good kind. The kind that steadies without steering. Somewhere in row Z, his mother's palms pressed to her mouth. The locket under his collar held its small warmth like a kept promise, and then, like rain beginning on a lake, the applause arrived. Sparse, then many, soft, then full. It rose and lifted, not a roar, but a standing thing. People stood without looking at each other first, as if their bodies had decided before their minds got there. The girl with the glittered eyelids stood. A custodian in a polo stood. A boy who had learned to smirk stood and forgot what his face usually did. Ethan blinked hard, and the lights bent briefly into stars. He did not bow grandly. He dipped, small, grateful, lifted the guitar a half-inch in a gesture that said, "We did it, and thank you, and I hear you." He tried to find his mother, and found her late. Always late to the obvious standing now, 2 eyes bright.
I'll draw trembling.
In that way that made him feel older and younger at once, the MC hustled out, eyes wide in the specific delight of a host who gets to ride a wave he did not make. Ethan Cole, everyone, he said. But the room was already saying it, Tethan, not Joker. Tethan, not punchline. Name said true can feel like a door unlocking. Backstage, hands reached for him. A drummer with wrists wrapped in tape slapped his shoulder. A violinist with perfect posture grinned so hard her eyes went crescent. The stagehand with the clipboard said, "Nice like a benediction." Miss Ramirez appeared as if conjured not. Hugging teachers had to navigate hugs, but holding his forearms and squeezing once. "You told it," she said. "Truth first." The judges had notes to finish, scores to add, numbers to turn into verdicts. But their faces said enough. The woman in the blazer had the look of someone whose mouth keeps wanting to smile and is trying, for the sake of appearances, not to. The middle judge looked like a person who had been proven wrong in the best possible way and was secretly grateful. The older judge had that far-off shine in his eyes, the look people get when they hear something that reminds them they were young once and brave then. Ethan stepped into the wings, and the darkness wrapped him like cool cloth. He leaned, his forehead for a second against the flat of the guitar, the way you lean against a door after you've outrun rain. He thought I said it what he had to say, the way he could say it. He let the thought fill him until there was room for the next breath. The show rolled on. Cymbals shimmered. A dancer's foot skated on resin. A tenor reached for a note and grabbed it. Ethan sat on a milk crate and unwound his right hand slowly, flexing the small muscles that would punish him tomorrow. He could still feel the audience's silence more than their noise. He could feel a shape in the air, like a place left for him at a table he had been walking past for years. When the last act ended and the curtain fell and rose again and fell once more, the MC summoned the cast to the stage for announcements. The line of performers stretched in a skittering rainbow. Ethan took his place between a magician with ink on his cuffs and a harpist, whose instrument glowed like a ship the judges conferred. Clipboards touched, pens clicked. The older judge handed the MC a folded piece of paper with a care that made it look like a secret map. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC said, and the room settled into that held breath posture again. "Thank you for a night of extraordinary talent. Awards were given the ordinary way at first. Here. Second there, a first that landed like confetti for a flawless soprano. Each time applause bloomed and faded. Each time Ethan clapped, honest as he knew how. And finally, the MC said, paper in hand, voice dipping into a tone he hadn't used all evening. The judges would like to present a recognition that's not given every year." A low murmur, heads angled. The older judge rose, took the mic gently, as if it were a bird he might startle. "Art is skill," he said, "and practice. Art is also courage. Tonight we heard something that reminded us what happens when a person tells the truth they learned the hard way and offers it without apology." He looked down the line, found Ethan's face, and let the look rest there, kind and exact. "For extraordinary originality, musicality, and heart, we award a special prize." The room shifted, that tiny seismic tilt that happens right before joy. The judge's mouth formed Ethan's name, and the sound of it seemed to step forward and take his hand. Ethan did not move right away. The magician's elbow nudged him, not unkindly. He walked, not floating, people always say floating, but his feet were lead and light together, to the center where the judge stood with a small trophy that shone like a private sunrise. He took it, and it was heavier than it looked. The locket pressed into his collarbone. From the back row, a woman made a sound that was not a sob, not laughter, something between. The audience stood again, unguid. He found the mic with his eyes, and then, against all specific instincts too, disappear, he leaned toward it. "Thank you," he said, voice steadying as it left his throat. He didn't have a speech. He had one sentence. "I learned on the internet," he said, and smiles flickered. "Yes, kid, we knew," and then he added, "but I learned to believe because of my mom." He lifted the trophy an inch, a salute in her direction. "This is ours." He stepped back, into the line as if he had not changed shape, as if the world had not tilted in his chest. The harpist bumped his shoulder, a small, conspiratorial joy. The magician whispered, "Teach me that chord," which was a way of saying, "I saw you," and the curtain fell for the last time with a sigh like a book closing. In the crush of bodies and congratulations backstage. Ethan moved like a person walking through warm rain, touched by many hands, stopped by many faces. Somehow intact, Ms. Ramirez pressed a folded card into his palm, her email. A list of summer programs with the word scholarship underlined twice. The middle judge shook his hand and said, "Keep writing." The woman in the blazer said, "Don't get precious. Always be brave and always be clear." The older judge didn't say anything. He just squeezed Ethan's shoulder and nodded. Once. In a way that felt like both a blessing and a dare. When he finally pushed through the stage door into the cool night, the air felt like a new instrument, tuned to a key he hadn't known existed. The parking lot lamps cast halos on the asphalt. His mother stood there in one of those halos, the locket at her throat, her eyes so wet they glittered. For a second, they only looked at each other, two people on either side of a river that had, in the span of a song, narrowed to a step. Then they moved. She pulled him into her trophy handle, biting between them, guitar hard against his ribs, and he let himself be small enough to be held. He could feel the laugh in her chest, the shake in her arms, the way her hands memorized the shape of his back, as if they were afraid of forgetting. "You told it," she said into his hair. "I did." He whispered, "You heard it?" "Oh, baby," she said, "I heard you before you played." They walked home slower than usual, because sometimes you have to teach your feet a new city, even when you're walking the same old routes. The trophy knocked against his thigh in a rhythm that braided with the memory of the piece. Tin roof. Open sky, a name said true, a note that hangs, a door that opens in the small kitchen. He set the trophy next to the cookie tin and the old laptop. All three gleamed in their ways: money, screen light, brass. He took off the locket and put it back around his mother's neck. "It heard the song," he said. She touched it and nodded. Later, alone in his room, he opened the case and laid the guitar across his knees. He did not play. He ran his fingers over the scar on the body and the places the finish had worn smooth under his forearm. The silence was not empty. It was rest. It was the held breath between movements. On his phone, messages blinked. A dozen from numbers he didn't recognize. 3 from kids he knew too well. 1 from Henrietta with a photo she'd sketched during the performance, his hands, the strings, a constellation of notes. "You changed the room," she'd written below it, in ink that smudged where she'd leaned on it too soon. Ethan smiled without showing his teeth. He turned off the light. He waited in the gentle dark for the next thing he would write to announce itself, because after a night like this, the future doesn't arrive with trumpets so much as tap, tap, tapping at the window like a moth, asking to be let in. Sleep came slowly, kindly. When it did, it sounded like applause at first, and then like rain. The curtain had already fallen twice, but the applause still hadn't stopped. It rose and fell in waves. Not frantic, not forced. Something steadier, like the sound of ocean surf. Endless and alive. Ethan stood among the other performers, his old guitar still slung across his shoulder, his fingers aching but buzzing with memory. The MC, his voice hoarse from excitement, leaned toward the mic once again. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, trying to calm the crowd, "tonight has been something truly special. Our judges have made their decisions." The applause softened into expectant silence. The standard awards came first, third place to the tap dancer who had rattled the floorboards, second to the soprano whose voice had reached the rafters, first to the magician whose sleight of hand dazzled the front row. Each announcement was met with polite cheers, flowers, photographs, and then the older judge rose. His glasses caught the spotlight, his hands steady on the mic. "This year," he said, his voice carrying not just authority, but warmth, "we witnessed something rare. Not just talent, but courage. Not just skill, but honesty. A performance that reminded us all why music matters, not because it impresses, but because it speaks." He paused, and the silence deepened, pulled tight. "For extraordinary originality, heart, and spirit, we award a special prize to Ethan Cole." The auditorium erupted. Ethan froze. His name felt unreal, like a word in a language he didn't yet know how to speak. A nudge from the magician beside him jolted him forward, and somehow his feet carried him to center stage. The trophy gleamed under the lights, small but radiant, its base engraved with the words, "Special Recognition, Extraordinary Talent, and Heart." As the judge placed it in his hands, Ethan's knees nearly buckled. He clutched the trophy, then instinctively lifted his gaze, scanning the audience until he found her, his mother, standing in the back row, her hands trembling against her lips, tears running freely down her cheeks. He held the trophy a little higher. Just for her, the applause swelled again. Someone shouted, "Bravo!" Another voice cried, "Play it again!" Though Ethan wanted to laugh, to weep, to fall to his knees, he did none of those things. Instead, he leaned into the microphone. I learned from the internet," he said, voice cracking just a little. A ripple of laughter, warm, not cruel, moved through the crowd. "But I kept going because of my mom. This is ours." He stepped back, the trophy clutched tight, the locket burning like a star against his chest. Backstage was chaos, hands clapping his shoulders, faces grinning, performers congratulating him. Ms. Ramirez squeezed his arm. He reminded them. "What music is," she whispered. The violinist, with perfect posture, handed him her rosin block. The magician slipped a playing card into his pocket, scribbled with the words, "You belong here." But Ethan only half heard them. His mind was on the figure waiting just beyond the stage door. He pushed through, guitar case banging against his leg, trophy clutched awkwardly in his hand. The cool night air rushed over him, sweet and sharp. And there she was, his mother, waiting. Under the yellow glow of the parking lot lamp, for a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then she ran to him, and he fell into her arms. The trophy pressed uncomfortably between them, but neither cared. She held him as if he were 5 years old again, her shoulders shaking with laughter and tears. "You did it," she whispered into his hair. "We did it," he corrected, voice muffled against her shoulder. When she pulled back, her eyes glistened. She touched the locket at his chest. "He would be so proud," she said softly. "I hope he heard it," Ethan replied. "Oh, baby," she said. Her voice breaking, he heard. They walked home slowly, the trophy clinking softly against his thigh with each step, like a metronome counting the beats of a new life. The stars stretched overhead, indifferent yet eternal. And Ethan lifted his eyes to them, imagining each one as a note in a melody too vast for him to play at somehow. Tonight, he felt part of it. When they reached the trailer, Ethan set the trophy on the small kitchen table beside the old cookie tin and the cracked laptop. It gleamed there, not as a prize, but as proof. Proof that all the late nights, the bleeding fingers, the laughter, the doubt, had led to this moment. He handed the locket back to his mother. She clasped it around her neck, tears still drying on her cheeks. "It's heard your song," she said. "Now it can rest." Later, in the quiet of his room, Ethan sat with the guitar on his lap. He didn't play, not yet, just held it, running his hand along the scarred wood, feeling the echo of tonight still alive inside it. His phone buzzed, messages from classmates who had mocked him, now writing things like, "You were amazing," and "Sorry for what I said." He let them sit unread. Forgiveness would come, maybe, but not tonight. Tonight belonged to the music. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and smiled. For the first time in his life, the silence around him wasn't heavy. It wasn't cruel. It was full. The silence was waiting for his next song.